community needs a space to happen. We looked around the city for spaces that were unused. We turned front yards and boulevards into not only places of public art and social interaction, but also places to grow delicious food and share meals. We put the call out for landowners who wanted to work and play collaboratively with their space. We created 6 different shared spaces in various parts of the city that took into account the physical location and the wishes of the owner of the property.
Placemaking is really about our community, you know, and the more that, it's like, how can you build from that? How can you build from the knowledge of that is a very crucial question, though, so it doesn't become just the premise of building a garden or building a pollinator garden, but what does it mean for the people that were involved with the creation, and what does it mean for their own expressivity in life?
Being in nature, away from urban environments, was sort of my norm growing up, so it's very deeply ingrained in me to appreciate nature and natural environments. The part perhaps that I contributed was the idea of having a pollinator garden, that both for the simple beauty of the flowers, but more so to support our pollinators, who are incredibly important to food production and just maintaining plants in general.
I think that's what's really great about what we've got going here, was that it seems to me that there was a large group of people that were involved with it, and it kind of happened kind of spontaneously in a certain kind of way. It was kind of an interesting dynamic.
When I've been working out here in the garden, putting plants in or watering them on a daily basis, I have talked to more neighbors and even strangers than I have in probably like the entire 15 years that I've lived here, because everyone just wants to learn more about what's going on. It's something novel, and you don't often see a boulevard being used.
It means the community. That's what it means to me. It means all the people that were involved with the creation of it.
The idea of placemaking is very important, and I think that not a lot of people may be aware of what it even is. But the more that we become urbanized and in that urban environment more segregated, it's really important that projects like this have a chance to come to fruition, because it certainly brings together groups of people, like-minded and of all kinds of backgrounds.
What we're doing is we've marked it as a place for pollinators. We've also marked it as a place for a community, for people to access each other in some ways.
Documenting like what we've created here all together and the other boulevard projects, and then showing people what is possible. Like, that's the best way to get people excited about being involved.
It's kind of like a good seed. It's like something was planted, and it takes a while for it to then seed elsewhere. So that's what this is about. This is a seeding, if you will.
Robin's project was really fascinating because we had to work with the different landowners, and we were also kind of had some restrictions because of sunlight and soil composition. Robin likes indigenous art, and so he went with a petroform. It's using natural objects to represent an idea, and Robin believes deeply in nonviolence, and so the animals that he wanted to represent were nonviolent animals. So when we started, we were planning on doing a frog, and somehow that frog turned into a turtle. And then we also put a Fibonacci spiral in the middle of it. That's kind of similar in Oliver's garden. There's kind of a cohesion between the two gardens, as well as exactly what Robin wanted on his boulevard.
I first met Colleen through an urban farming project that I've been working with the last couple of years.
I'd heard about urban farms, and so I did a little digging, and I found 11 companies that will do this for you. And I interviewed everybody. Gabriel Pliska was the person who was head and shoulders above everybody else. He just seemed really committed and really interesting, and we obviously had a lot of the same values in terms of conservation and so forth. And he said, so do you want me to put a few raised beds here or there? And I went, no, I want you to use the whole property. I want you to convert the entire thing over to farm.
Through just our conversations, I learned that she's a sculptor, and then she had learned through myself about this placemaking project that I've been involved with. And so then she jumped to the chance to share her skills and share her space with our group. And one thing that Colleen thought was maybe we can have a sculpture garden there, and using everyday objects such as wires or any everyday objects. And her theme was the ocean, so something integrating maybe the land aspects with the element of the sea.
We were thinking of a theme. We thought Octopus's Garden was kind of good.
So all of us got together, and it was really nice to be in the presence of Colleen because she's a professional sculptor. So it was really nice for her to see her in all of her glory doing what she does best, and us as amateurs there having fun and creating all these wire sculptures very spontaneously. It was really fun to share our skills and then ultimately place that out onto the boulevard for the public to see in this sort of outdoor art gallery in front of her home, which was great as the theme of the Octopus's Garden. So amongst all the vegetables, it was really great to see all the ocean-themed wire sculptures.
Anne's a great, fascinating woman. She's a permaculturist certified and who's done a lot of work in not just in her own living quarters, but with various community groups. She had already created a significant amount of her front yard area into a permaculture garden where she was growing varieties of foods and things like that. And then she got a hold of us, and so we got the plants from the Environmental Youth Alliance. We used a lot of repurposed materials, old fences, driftwood, boulders and rocks, and we created a pollinator garden that was part of not just the community, but also a part of a greater environmental movement. Everybody can grow their own food, everybody can make their own living ways more beautiful, and in the process create a more beautiful city and a more beautiful world. The mosaic garden I really, really loved. We worked together with everybody to create a mosaic pattern for the front of the planter boxes that we'd already built. A mosaic is a great metaphor for, we live in the cultural mosaic. That is what Canada is. In the process of creating, we get to know the people that we're creating with. All these different pieces that in and of themselves are not anything, but when you put them together, they become something beautiful. It's all these little single tiles coming together to create this larger image, which is essentially what our city is and what our country is and ultimately what the world is.
I'm a big believer that that the built environment shapes people's behaviors. And I've mostly grown up in the suburbs. And the suburbs were all a little bit different. You know, some of them, the scale was a little bit smaller, and it was just easier to see your neighbors and to chat with them. Others, the houses were further apart, and you basically didn't know your neighbors. I mean, you might see them, but you didn't really know them.
I grew up in a number of places. So the first place I lived in was a small sort of village in southern Africa. And then I moved around the world and lived in a lot of different places.
We moved to Kitsilano about 2 years ago. You know, Kits has always had this very sort of eccentric creative undercurrent, and I was worried about that disappearing over time because there's been a lot of issues with, you know, gentrification and generational changes. And so this was, I think, in the winter time, like maybe back in February or something, and we're in the living room, and it just kind of came to me like a vision. I said, Glenn, we've got to do something weird. We've got to do something really weird. We need to make a lizard sculpture. And Glenn just kind of looked at me and went, yeah, that's a great idea. And so that's kind of how it started. I would say that I don't really think of it as art as some sort of separate endeavor or, you know, profession. I really think of it as just creativity. And I think creativity is very important for everyone, regardless of what they do.
Basically, I just went around and thought, okay, we're going to do a lizard, and I don't like this hedge, so it was a bit of work convincing everyone around the neighborhood that we could get rid of the hedge and that would open up the space and how it would open up the space.
Part of the motivation for doing it was to bring some community character and eccentricity to the neighborhood. And then once we got started with it and kind of got people on board, then we heard through other people, like say Keiko, oh, placemaking. And I was like, aha, that's what it is, it's placemaking. It's a shared common room, basically. And it's really changed how we know our neighbors because, you know, you really only get to know people in general when you just spend time with them, like downtime with them.
I think also when you feel that you're really connected to a neighborhood, that you feel, oh, this is a space where I want to live. I don't see myself ever leaving. Inevitably, you discover that, oh, you have a lot in common with these people, and then, oh, I see my neighbors a lot more than I see friends.
People only really communicate with each other and talk with each other if they have the environment that facilitates that.